Demar Hamlin and what his injury can teach us about gaining perspective.
Right? And so they're fighting not only he.
There was a Trinity Radio episode.
Because you guys preach stuff that is like literally unrecognizable to an ancient African.
You can do it, man. It's urban apologetics. You know what I'm saying? I got to show them like they did with the gospel.
What up, y'all? It's your hometown hero, the real Adam Coleman, and you're riding with Tru-ID, where we engage the important questions of our time. Because you can't build a strong community on a foundation of weak ideas. And but glad to be back here with y'all one more again, man. You know what it is. And got a lot to talk about. As usual. You know, I try to keep these episodes packed with information that is of interest to you, the viewers. You know, I wouldn't be here without y'all. You know, so a little bit of a serious tone today. A little bit of a serious tone as I'm releasing this episode. A lot of people, you know, who just really across the nation, you know, have been really captivated by a very, I guess, troubling and, you know, gripping story with respect to an athlete, I believe he's a safety for the Buffalo Bills, NFL athlete by the name of Demar Hamlin. You know, as many of you, I'm sure, you know, it's particularly those who are keeping track with the sports world, know that earlier this week, you know, Demar Hamlin sustained a very serious and troubling injury during a Monday Night Football game where he actually went into cardiac arrest, you know, right there on the field. Had to be resuscitated on the field, and I believe also once he got to the ER, and has since then been in critical condition. You know, as I understand it, I just checked a few minutes ago. As I understand it, he is actually making progress. So there is some ray of hope in this situation, where apparently he's regained consciousness and is able to communicate via writing messages. But nevertheless, he's still got a ways to go in terms of recuperation, and it's been a very jarring story. For anybody who, I mean, I'm not an NFL buff by any means, but certainly this level of injury is unprecedented. And our thoughts and prayers, definitely go out to the Hamlin family, Hamlin himself, and all of his loved ones. But it's definitely been, I think, a week of reflection. On a lot of different levels for many of us out here, and so I kind of wanted to share a couple thoughts, things have been going through my mind this week pertaining to this situation, tying it into the kinds of things that we deal with on the channel all the time. I mean, first of all, I was just blown away. I mean, it was really crazy. I was out and about. I think we was at Walmart, with my wife and kids doing a little bit of shopping. And I was telling my wife, like, yo, I got to get back, to see this game. It's about to be the Bengals versus, the Buffalo Bills. This game is going to be crazy. You got Josh Burrow, who's an up-and-coming quarterback. You got, was it Josh Allen is up-and-coming quarterback as well. Excuse me, Joe Burrow and Josh Allen, two up-and-coming quarterbacks. The Bengals are playing well this year, as are the Bills. Two powerhouses on a Monday Night Football game. It's gonna be crazy. I'm telling her all this. I mean, she don't care nothing about it because she's not a football fan. But I'm just kind of like, yo, we got to get back to the crib because I'm trying to watch this game. And so we finish shopping and get back, and I'm thinking, okay, cool. I'm probably midway through the first quarter, maybe the end of the first quarter, I'll be able to catch the rest of the game. Rush upstairs, get my prepare myself a little something to eat. And sit down, turn the game on, and everybody's looking like mad serious. I'm like, dang, like what happened? You know what I mean? And you had, I think the announcer's name is Booger McFarland. I think he's a former NFL player. He's looking real serious, and they're showing clips of, Josh Allen was, crying and stuff like that. I'm like, man, what in the world? I'm sitting there looking at it with my wife. I'm like, yo, what's going on? I thought maybe it was like a mass shooting or something like that, at the stadium or something. You know what I mean? Because everybody's like looking real serious, and they were kind of like all the announcers were kind of like talking around, what happened, but not actually saying what happened, when I tuned in. So finally, they talked about how, Hamlin, had, went in for a hit on a Bengals player, and himself kind of got hit, in the chest, and they were showing the replay. Excuse me. And I was telling my wife like, oh man, it must have been like a head-to-head situation, and maybe it was a concussion or whatever. But then when they showed the replay, I'm like, man, like it's kind of crazy. There's no head-to-head contact, and then they show him getting up from the hit and then falling back down, man. And it was like, dang, it was just, it was deep. Like you immediately, looking at the replay, like you felt like, oh man, this is like really bad. This is not something that's like your run of the mill. I shouldn't say run of the mill, but we've seen injuries, where it's like. That maybe a leg injury of some sort where somebody gets carted off, or maybe even a neck injury or something like that, hit somebody the wrong way. Maybe it's even a neck injury. But something of this nature where somebody is literally on the field fighting for their life. You know what I mean? Definitely unprecedented from an NFL standpoint. I mean, I'm not old enough to remember. I think the gentleman's name was Stingley, who was paralyzed during the game. Definitely not old enough to recall that, but that's the only thing that I've heard of that was even kind of comparable, to this situation, but this is definitely uncharted waters from a NFL standpoint. So then there's, people going back and forth and, whether they should play the game or not, or whether they will be playing the game or not. And, people tweeting about it and getting upset at what other people were saying on Twitter. It was just really crazy, man. So, but immediately, as I was saying to my wife, it's like, man, this game, whether they play or not, like, I don't even care. Like, it's, it don't even matter. Like, how can you even watch a game after that, with and how can you expect players to even show up and, suit back up or whatever, and finish the game. And it's just, it was just a really jarring moment, man, where I think, we tend to look at sports, for amusement, obviously for entertainment, to kind of disconnect from the real world, all of those things. But all of a sudden real life, invades, if you will, our entertainment, it kind of brings us back to the real world. Like, yo, this is real stuff. You know what I mean? It was just a real, jarring experience that kind of brought things back to the real world. You have essentially, real life invading, this entertainment space, if you will, with this tragic incident. And, it's really one of those events that kind of makes you put things in perspective, and it took me back to an experience I had like some years ago. I remember, I'm a pretty big football fan, you know what I mean? Grew up in the Washington, D.C. area, Northern Virginia area. So I've been a begrudging Washington Commanders fan. We're Commanders now, whatever, And I remember some years ago when we drafted RG3, Robert Griffin III. It was, everybody was thinking it was going to be a nice little turnaround, for the franchise, but unfortunately after his rookie season, I mean, he was playing pretty well, killing it, you know what I mean? And he gets hurt, in a playoff game. He's off for a season, but you're expecting him to come back. It was going to be like this big, turnaround. And then, in the meantime, he's got this whole I think it was Operation Patience or Trust the Process or something, whatever it was, when he was rehabbing, and you're like, oh man, as a Washington fan, I'm thinking like, oh man, when he gets back, we going to be out here, balling, whatever, And so, in the midst of all that, my wife and I, we had been, struggling to have children early on in marriage. Had some issues there, which I've talked about on the channel before. And my wife had gotten pregnant, and we were like expecting our first child. My oldest now. My daughter. And it was right around the time, like it was in she was born in October, so we were expecting her like right around the beginning of football season. And so as we're preparing for my daughter, it just so happened that the day RG3 was supposed to make his return to like Monday Night Football, after this whole big buildup of him, training and all that kind of stuff to get back in the game, we were supposed to be doing a tour of the hospital, where my daughter was going to be born. So, we're all excited, seeing where my wife is going to, give birth, and then she's going to be over here and over there, you actually give birth and all that kind of stuff in the maternity ward. That's what I was looking for. So anyway, so we're supposed to be taking this tour, and I'm thinking like, oh man, this is great, man. I'm excited about my daughter getting ready to be born, about to do this tour, and then I'll be able to probably catch the the second half of the game or something like that. RG3 is gonna be back killing it or whatever. It's gonna be a great evening for me. Probably get a good meal and just enjoy the whole nine. And again, we was playing. I'm pretty sure it was the Philadelphia Eagles. You know what I mean? And I don't know if Vic was there or not. I got to think about that. But I know he was playing like the Eagles. And it was going to be this big Monday night game, man. And we're touring, the hospital. and I'm like checking the score, and I'm like the score just keeps getting worse and worse. Like I feel like every time I check the score, we were down like another touchdown. You know what I mean? We were literally getting killed. I mean, the Eagles put up a ridiculous amount of points. I think they put up like 42 that night or something like that. It was just like we totally got blown out. You know what I mean? So I'm walking around, touring this hospital. I'm mad, because RG3 didn't show up, and we're losing the game, and we're supposed to be our big turnaround, and here we are, taking this L. And I'm sitting here, like, man, I can't believe it. Now, meanwhile, again, I'm touring the hospital, getting prepared for my first child. You know what I mean? It had been quite a struggle, just to get to that point, to even have our first child. So I'm sitting there thinking about it. I'm like, man, and by this point, I think it was like when we were down like 35-0 or whatever it may have been. And I'm mad about it. And I'm just thinking like, what's wrong with me? I'm literally sitting here upset. I'm touring a hospital to prepare for my firstborn child. You know what I mean? That we had been praying for, fasting for, believing God for years at this point, a number of years. And I'm sitting there mad at a football game. You know what I'm saying? Because my team is losing a football game. You know what I mean? I got, I guess guys running around getting paid millions of dollars to play a game, none of which is going in my pocket. You know what I mean? And I'm sitting here mad, walking around the hospital mad, because my team is losing a football game. And it was just a real wake up call. It's like, man, you know what? I'm truly investing too much of myself into a game. I'm investing too much of myself emotionally, in terms of my thoughts and attention, into a game, into sports. I got to get my priorities right. And like I said, it was just a wake up call for me, man. And I realized that I just hadn't been sober minded. I'd allowed football to control my emotions far more than a game ever should. And it was a real eye opener for me. And so those are kind of things I guess I'm talking about. I was kind of reflecting on that this week. That events like the Demar Hamlin situation really just cause us to put things in perspective. At the end of the day, it's a game. I was watching First Things First. Shout out to my guy Chris Broussard. I'm gonna come back to this in a minute, but he was just talking about as he returned back from, actually he hadn't lost his father about a week ago. He returns, and this is like one of the first issues that they're covering, and he was just talking about how dealing with the loss of his father just caused him to reflect on the fact that none of this stuff really matters. You know what I mean? Ultimately, right? And I mean, now mind you, like Chris Broussard is a sportscaster on Fox Sports. I mean, his whole livelihood revolves around sports. So for him to say none of it really matters, I mean, that's pretty profound, man. But again, I think incidents like these just really cause us to had to put things in perspective. You know what I mean? So now at the end of the day, I mean, entertainment is what it is. I mean, entertainment is, it's a type of escape. That's kind of what we use it for, whether it be movies, music. In this case, we're talking about sports. I mean, that's what amusement is. It's like you kind of disconnect from, the regular running of things on a day to day to engage in something that kind of takes your mind away from it. Something, hopefully pleasurable and healthy, hopefully. That's just kind of the nature of what entertainment is. And I'm not necessarily like, being super anti entertainment, but I do think that something to think about is that what does it look like when we engage in entertainment to the extent that we are no longer what the Bible describes as being sober-minded? What happens when we become, in a sense, intoxicated with entertainment, intoxicated with amusement? I think that that's very possible. You know what I mean? I think just reflecting on my own life, there's definitely times when I've been intoxicated, with entertainment. I used to be a heavy video gamer. You know what I mean? Heavy video gamer. And one thing that I feel like God checked me on is that I noticed that when I was most stressed out, that's when I tended to, play more video games. You know what I mean? Because in a sense of all the things I felt like in my life I couldn't control, I can beat somebody at Street Fighter 2. I can get on 2K and master, green in that jump shot, so I can get on there and ball out, score some points. Like I can control that to some extent. when everything else in my life is out of control. Like I think that's just kind of the nature of entertainment sometimes. Like we're looking for something to pour ourselves into to take us away from other problems, in the same way that somebody might engage in alcoholism or smoking weed or drugs or whatever it may be. Like you can really be intoxicated with entertainment. You can use it as a crutch or some sort of tool. And I think that the scriptures encourage us against that kind of a thing. You know what I mean? Just real quick, I want to read a scripture here. Let me bring it up in my notes. Kind of along these lines, lest I be accused of making stuff up. But, First Thessalonians chapter 5, verses 1-8. It says, now, brothers and sisters, about times and dates we do not need to write you, for you know very well that the day of the Lord will come like a thief in the night. While people are saying peace and safety, destruction will come on them suddenly, as labor pains on a pregnant woman, and they will not escape. But you, brothers and sisters, are not in darkness, so that this day should not surprise you like a thief. You are all children of the light and children of the day. We do not belong to the night or to the darkness. So then, let us not be like others who are asleep, but let us be awake and sober. For those who sleep at night and those who get drunk, for those who sleep, sleep at night, and those who get drunk at night. But since we belong to the day, let us be sober, putting on faith and love as a breastplate and the hope of salvation as a helmet. That's First Thessalonians chapter 5, verses 1-8. And, what I found was interesting is that word sober, sometimes it'll be translated or rendered rather in different translations as like serious or self-controlled, vigilant, attentive and things of that nature. It's the Greek word nephemin there, is the word for sober in verse 6. And it's just interesting how, Paul is using this analogy of the night versus day, and, people who are asleep or sleep at night, or people who would get drunk at night, but we're supposed to be sober and awake and so on and so forth. And I was just kind of thinking about it throughout the week, how even though we're supposed to be people who are sober-minded, we can easily get taken in by entertainment to the extent that we're not, living sober-minded in the way that Paul describes here in First Thessalonians 5. We can easily be so caught up in, just the whether it be social media or whether it be, whatever entertainment outlet, you might be interested in. Maybe it's for somebody it's not, sports, maybe it's, I don't know, anime or something like that. Whatever it may be. You can definitely find yourself so taken in, by entertainment that you lose sight of things that are truly important and the kinds of things that a Christian ought to be giving their attention and their energy to, if you will. Again, I'm not saying that, all entertainment is just, out the window. I'm definitely not saying that at all. But there can be a kind of intoxication, if you will. It's almost like we can be, entertaining ourselves to death, right? And I think that just kind of reflecting on, the situation with Demar Hamlin kind of brought me to that. It's so easy to lose track of real life. I'm saying when you're so steeped in entertainment. Now, interestingly enough, I think that even when it comes to just the players themselves, I mean, like sometimes we forget, like these are real people. You know what I mean? Like we can be so into the entertainment aspect that we're watching, like we almost treat it like it's WWE or something like that. But like these are real people, and just the very nature of football. It's a very violent sport, which really that can be a whole discussion right there. Like I don't have a clear cut view on it, so kind of thinking through it. But I do have some friends of mine who, on the grounds of their Christian convictions, biblically based convictions, they don't indulge in watching football because it is such a violent sport and has, takes such a toll, on the players. You know what I mean? These are not like video game, characters or something like that. These are real people. I remember back in the day, and shoot, I'm kind of dating myself a little bit, but I remember when I was a kid, man, Tecmo Bowl 2, Tecmo Bowl and Tecmo Bowl 2 was like, that was it. You rock with, Bo Jackson or Randall Cunningham and just be killing it. That was like just the game, But you might be playing through the season, and all of a sudden, maybe your favorite player, gets hurt on a play, and I can almost even remember the song. It's like, you know what I mean? And then you like, oh man, you just kind of like throw the controller down because like your favorite guy's hurt, and he gets carted off the field. You know what I mean? And you're upset because now you can't win out that season or something like that. But it was a game, right? It was a game. It was just a character on the screen, but this is not like that. I'm saying Demar Hamlin is not just like a video game character. I'm sure he's on Madden, but he's not just a video game character. These are real life people, And I think that it's so easy in the midst of all the entertainment to lose sight of the fact that these are real people who are getting real injuries, like CTE. When it comes to traumatic brain injuries and so forth, like those things are real. And I do think that, again, I'm still kind of like thinking through it myself, but I do have some friends who, on the basis of just the violence of the sport and the toll that it takes on people, they just refrain from watching it. I mean, I think that's at least a conversation worth having. You know what I mean? Even myself, I mean, to be honest with you, I used to be like, when it comes to like MMA, man, like I was a MMA fan. Like I was, whatever sort of MMA, was on TV, I was watching it. Every UFC event, I was watching it, hosting people at my home and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not condemning anybody. Like right now, I'm speaking on just, I think, matters of conscience that people have to sort out for themselves individually. But I just say for me, I loved fight sports. You know what I'm saying? I really did. You know what I mean? And even to this day, I still enjoy, doing martial arts. But, I don't think there's anything wrong with it in terms of, learning how to protect yourself. But with respect to combat sports, so to speak, I can't bring myself to watch it now. Whether it be boxing, whether it be any form of MMA, anything, kickboxing, whatever. I really can't bring myself to indulge in it now, and in part is because obviously Tru-ID, the real you, Imago Dei. That's what that stands for. And so I've spent a lot of time over the last couple of years doing research on what it means to be made in the image of God. And in the course of doing that, I've had to spend a lot of time reading up on consciousness and how the mind works, and just how I think when I was coming up, I kind of viewed the physical body as just being like a vehicle for the soul. But as I'm doing more studying, I'm realizing like, no, actually the physical body and the soul are integrated in such a profound way, that it's when you're looking at the physical body, it's not just a vehicle, but it really is, to some extent, an extension of who I am as being made in the image of God. And so as I'm kind of studying these things and gaining maybe a more appreciation for just the Imago Dei and the implications that has on consciousness in the physical body, I realized like when it comes to sports where the intent is to interrupt the mental faculties of somebody else, i.e. knock somebody out, when the intent is to do harm to someone else physically, when that's the name of the game, as it is with combat sports, I'm like, man, I can't really get down with that, I really can't get down with that. So for me, as a matter of conscience, I no longer indulge in watching combat sports, Now, again, some of my other friends will take that, to say, hey, well, therefore, on those same grounds, they don't watch football. And I think there's a case to be made there. I don't know. I'll leave that open. Maybe you guys can kind of, throw something in the comments to tell me, what you think about that. But I think it's at least a conversation worth having. So, having taken that long, rabbit trail, just kind of bringing it back to, at the end of the day, regardless of where you land on that, I think if we are engaging in some sort of entertainment where we're not taking into account the humanity of, the persons involved, and their human dignity, even if they by choice submit that human dignity for to be undermined, if you will, for the sake of the entertainment of others. I think at least as Christians, I think it's something serious to think about, it's like, man, is that really something that we should be engaged in? I don't know. Y'all let me know if I'm tripping. Y'all can put something in the comments. Maybe I'll revisit this at a later time. I'm just kind of, riffing and talking off the top of my head here. But I do think that at the end of the day, regardless of where you fall on that, sober-mindedness, man. Like if you're engaged in some sort of entertainment to the extent that you lose track of the humanity of others, or you are unable to keep track of the things that are even around you, that you should be present and, attentive to, then you've really missed the mark with respect to what 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 describes. So I think with that being the case, the other side, I guess it's not all, doom and gloom here. I mean, it is a serious situation with Demar Hamlin, but if there is like a ray of encouragement, that I think came out is just seeing people show up, man. Seeing people show up, with like a lot of love and compassion. Apparently, as I understand it, Demar Hamlin had some sort of like toy drive going for, I guess disadvantaged kids or what have you. That I think either they were hoping to raise like $2,500, or maybe they had already raised $2,500 or something like that at the time that he, got injured. And in response to his injury, I mean, people just began, giving and giving and giving to that toy drive to the extent that now I'm certain it's like well over $6 million, right? You went from $2,500 to well over $6 million. I mean, that's a pretty, I mean, to describe it as a huge outpour, I think is really an understatement, but it really is pretty awesome to see that, and just to kind of see how people react, in the face of tragedy. And I won't go into it all here. I was actually on the King Talks radio show, which you should check out, by the way, every Sunday at 6:00. And we were just talking about, this whole situation with Demar Hamlin and kind of how it intersects with, the problem of evil. A lot of people asking the question, like, why do bad things happen to good people? Like, how could this happen to this, 24-year-old young man? This is just a tragic situation. When tragedy strikes like that, why? How could God allow us to live in a world, where bad things like this occur? And interestingly enough, I think that in a snippet form, if you will, just the generosity that was being shown, in light of this tragedy, kind of speaks to what one of the main responses that Christians often give in the face of what philosophers refer to as the problem of evil, the problem of evil and suffering. Again, I'm not going to get into it all now. I actually have whole videos on the problem of evil, but there are various different theodicies, if you will, that Christian philosophers will give in response to the problem of evil. And one of them is this notion that in a world where God allows at least some measure of evil, it also allows for certain types of goods to be shown and evident that otherwise could not be in the absence of evil. So when you think about, just to kind of bring it out of the abstract, if you will, think about Dr. King, Dr. Martin Luther King. Think about Frederick Douglass, Henry Highland Garnett. A lot of people that we talk about on this channel all the time. Harriet Tubman, freedom fighters, that we see in the African American tradition. What makes them significant historically, right? They're historically significant because they're, in some sense or another, morally significant, right? When you think about, Dr. King, and when you think about Harriet Tubman, some of these figures that I'm naming here, Otto Cato and people like that, these are people who, in the face of oppression, really showed courage. They showed bravery. Thinking about Ida B. Wells, thinking about, Fannie Lou Hamer, they, in the face of incredible opposition and pressure and oppression, they showed courage, right? But in a sense, like, if you don't have an occasion to show courage like that, then the moral good of courage would not be expressed. You just wouldn't get a chance to see it, if you will. You know what I mean? And so, the argument goes that there are certain types of goods that are more evident in a world where there's some measure of evil, and to some extent, maybe there are certain types of good that ultimately are grounded within God, that are made more apparent against the backdrop of evil, and so in that sense, God is justified in allowing certain measures of evil because it then gives an opportunity for certain types of goods to be demonstrated and shown and evident that otherwise would not be. And the value of those goods outweighs the just the evil that gives occasion to them, if you will. And so it's kind of like, in snippet form, like I said, I think with the Demar Hamlin situation, just this outpouring of generosity and compassion and care, is almost kind of a glimpse into that type of theodicy, I think. Is the fact that you have, in the face of this tragedy, it did give occasion, to a tremendous good. Now, I'm not saying that, I wished, Demar Hamlin to be hurt or anything along those lines. But I am saying, though, that it could very well be, that in the best of all possible worlds, it could very well be the case, that some measure of evil is provides, a window to greater measures of good that could otherwise not be seen. So, that's just one perspective on looking at it. But then, maybe you could look at it from a soul building perspective. That's another theodicy, just the fact that evils in the world, suffering, various sorts, not only give occasion to certain types of goods, but it gives occasion to the development of certain levels of character and maturity, generosity being a positive character trait, people being able to exercise that and maybe develop in that area, in the same way, maybe it is the case that in a world without, evil, you wouldn't have certain occasions to develop, some sort of moral proficiency that is ultimately valuable, more valuable than not, not seeing that expressed. So, with that being said, I'm going to end out with a somewhat of a different take, kind of along the lines of what I was just talking about, but somewhat of a different take. And before I do that, I want to play this clip. I want you guys to see this real quick clip that I think will, give some insight in terms of what I believe may be, most central to how a Christian, can navigate tragedies like these, particularly if it's in the life of somebody that you know or are quite close to. So, take a look at this clip right quick.
Then people found tweets to get mad at. Then people were mad at the sport of football as a whole. Some people decided to blame modern medicine and vaccines for what was just an inexplicable, terrifying event. And it made me, in the moment, I gotta say, bro, two of the closest people in the world to me, my wife and you, my partner for years, are deeply religious people. And I'm not. And it made me a little envious in that moment, and since then, that I didn't have like that foundation of there's I don't want to say a greater purpose or a higher power or something, because I feel like at times like this, when there's an inexplicable tragedy, you're almost flailing about, like, why did it happen to this kid in this moment? And then you learn he's such a good kid. And so I don't know if any of that made sense to the audience. I hope it did. But that's how I was feeling watching something we'd never seen on an NFL field before.
Now, that's just fascinating right there, and it really brings me to the third major point that I wanted to make, which is the Christian witness. What does it look like for Christians, for us to be a witness and like a light post, to people who are experiencing tragedy of some sort? I just thought it was really interesting when you think about just kind of listening to Nick Wright. I feel like he said at least a couple times, on First Things First. I watch that show pretty often. I think he said at least a couple times he's not really a religious man, but it was just really fascinating for him to say that of all the people that are closest to him, two of which have a strong relationship with God, or some sort of strong spirituality, his wife and Chris Broussard, And I think that's just a powerful testimony, man. It's just really powerful, Now, I mean, I'm sure Chris is not, walking around, the set with a Bible in one hand, preaching to people all day. I'm certain that's the case, But however he's living his life before Nick Wright has made an impression to the extent that he believes Chris to have this strong relationship with God, such that it came to mind, And during this time of tragedy. To, he even said that he was envious of, people like his wife and Chris Broussard, who have this relationship with God. It can, be a foundation and provide insights and maybe some sort of, way forward during times of tragedy. He said that he was envious of that, and continues to be. It wasn't just like a fleeting moment, but it seems like he'd really been thinking about that, and I just think that that's pretty powerful, right? It's pretty powerful that you can be in a setting, just being a Christian, to such an extent that it makes an impression on somebody else that they can be envious of your relationship with God, in that sort of a way. That's powerful stuff. That's powerful stuff. And I think that's how it should be. I think we should all aspire to live a life that where people in their hardest times, are desirous of the relationship with God that we have. I think that kind of witness is really reflective of the heart of the gospel, right? To kind of put it in a snippet form, we live in a broken world, right? I mean, Genesis to Revelation. I mean, you get to chapter 3, right? And things are already off the rails. You have sin coming into the picture and all the brokenness that it brings with us, and ultimately, that's what Christ came to fix. We don't have a God who stands at arm's length from humanity and just watches us, wallow in suffering and destruction. The centerpiece of the gospel is that God himself wrapped himself in flesh and enters into the muck and mire of this broken world, right? To redeem us from it. He doesn't stay at arm's length, but he gets his hands dirty in the suffering and the toil. And he truly, again, takes on humanity. He's not like, it's not like he's not faking it, right? When Jesus wept for Lazarus, those are real tears. He experienced the pain of suffering in that regard. Certainly on the cross, taking our sins upon himself, and enduring just the most excruciating type of suffering that one can imagine. God enters into that for the benefit of others. I'm saying for our benefit, right? And I think that it's unfortunate that you have some, I'll just say strains of Christianity and I believe pseudo Christian teaching, today that they almost essentially teach that suffering is something to be, that we should be immune, if you will, to all suffering. Like if you have enough faith, if you just believe hard enough, you just, speak it into existence enough, then you can just kind of, circumvent and just get around all suffering and just live peaches and cream every day, all day. If your faith is strong enough, that's not the gospel. That's not what the Bible teaches. What the Bible does teach is that those who are grounded in Christ, those who are grounded in God's love, those who are grounded in the hope that the cross affords, they're the kind of people who God develops in such a way that when suffering does come, they're not shaken to the point where they're in dismay and just despair and there's just no coming back for them, but they're able to endure in such a way that they can be a lighthouse of hope for those around them. We have a firm foundation in Christ, such that there are instances where when suffering is all around, or in the face of suffering that we encounter, whether it be our own or others, we can be a light, we can be a witness to someone else, such that they are desirous of the kind of relationship that with God that we have, right? I think that's just so profound. Actually, I did a episode, I think it was with Doug Rotice. This was like right before like COVID hit and all that kind of stuff. It was actually, matter of fact, it was in response to the death of Kobe Bryant, and we were just talking about just the power of lament, like what it means to have a robust understanding of lamenting. What does the Bible have to say about lamenting, and how you can come alongside people and, sometimes it's not about, preaching their head off or giving them a pep talk, but just lamenting with them, and how that can be a witness of just coming alongside folks and in a sense suffering with them, carrying burdens with them, how that can be just such a powerful witness for Christ, but in the same fashion that Jesus doesn't keep suffering at bay, but for the sake of others, just, dives right into it. Sometimes we find ourselves, with that same kind of opportunity, and we shouldn't shirk away from it. Because we just never know how you might be missing an opportunity to be a blessing to somebody else. I mentioned Harriet Tubman earlier. Of course, if she were to escape to the north, and I mean that would have been fantastic. That's a great story right there. But she didn't just escape to the north; she went back, right? She went back into the South, back into where the suffering was that she had come from, for the sake of others, to draw some other folks out. That's powerful. That's a powerful witness. I think about like, in more recently than that, during the Holocaust, you have a guy by the name of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, young German theologian who had an opportunity to come here to America during, as things were really kicking off with the Holocaust. But he chose to go back. He was here in America, and he actually chose to go back to Germany, as the Holocaust was heightening and so forth, because he wanted to be a witness and be a light for Christ in that environment. And it cost him his life. He ended up in a concentration camp, and he died preaching the gospel, in that setting. So again, he could have just dipped out, and just would have been another guy who was able to escape those circumstances. But he chose to be a witness and go back. That's powerful. That's the nature of the incarnation. We just came from the Christmas season, celebrating the incarnation, right? That's what the incarnation is all about. It's about diving into where the pain is, to live redemptively for the sake of others, man. That's what love looks like. That's what God's love looks like. And I think that with all the suffering going on, I think, we have to ask ourselves, maybe, you might be facing something as not as, front page, as the Demar Hamlin injury. Maybe it's some suffering in your own life or in a family member or whatever. I think that I'm not going to make it sound like peaches and cream. Sometimes it's far easier said than done, but it is the case, though, that I think that suffering often provides us an opportunity to be a witness. The fact of the matter is, actually, there's a quote from C.S. Lewis I want to read right quick, kind of along those lines. I think it's pretty fitting here. It says, "We can ignore even pleasure, but pain insists upon being attended to. God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pains. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world." It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. It's interesting, man. Like, nobody really likes pain, for the most part, right? But when you think about it, if you didn't have, talking about physically, if you didn't have the ability to sense pain, imagine how dangerous life would be. Imagine being bit by a snake and not knowing that you were bitten, or having your hand on a hot stove and not realizing that your hand is literally burning. The flesh is burning off. There are actually people like that. There are some people who are born with a disorder where they don't feel pain, and they always have to be concerned about things just like that. Sustaining some sort of injury, whether it be the pricking of a toe, where you're bleeding out or something like that, and not able to feel that pain. There's a danger to not being able to feel pain, because pain alerts us to danger. Pain alerts us that something is wrong. Likewise, kind of broadening that out, sometimes we do experience pain. Sometimes tragedy happens. But I don't think that it's purposeless. It certainly doesn't have to be. There are times when, a certain pain is allowed in our lives to, again, rouse a deaf world, to wake us up, to alert us that something's really wrong. It's so easy, to just kind of go about our business, in the day to day, and forget about God, forget about eternality and the kind of things that really matter, But I think that you don't want to miss opportunities like these, when there is pain present, to say, wait a minute, this pain isn't just here just cause, but this is an opportunity maybe to point somebody to that lighthouse. Point somebody to the ultimate solution for all the pain of this world, which is Christ. I truly believe that. Again, I'm not going to go into it now, but it's like I said on this channel before, God is what you can refer to as an incommensurable good. He's a good that's so good that it can't be counterbalanced or outweighed by any finite evil or suffering that we can experience in this life. So when it comes to an eternal loving relationship with goodness itself, aka God, that's just something that's a hope that just in principle can't be undone, by the sufferings of this life. It can't be outmatched. It can't be outweighed by anything that we experience here, and so I think that when we look at the world around us and see the pain that's going on, when we see things that we just kind of echo in our souls, man, it ought not to be. it does kind of point us to the fact that, you know what, there needs to be a hope that's big enough to carry the weight of all of that we experience. And I commend to you, I don't know who's watching right now. I just commend to you that hope is Christ. Maybe you're like Nick Wright, maybe you don't have that relationship with God, to kind of serve as that foundation and a way forward. And, maybe tragedy has visited you or someone that you love, or just the sufferings of this life you feel are kind of towering over you. My prayer for you today, man, is that the darkness of this world would not overtake you. But rather than that, the suffering that we experience in this life would point you to the one who has overcome it all, and through whom we can all overcome. And that's Jesus Christ. By grace through faith, you can be saved and really have and take hold of that great hope, So, but yeah, man, with that being said, I definitely want to send prayers to, Demar Hamlin, his family and loved ones and so forth, as he continues to recuperate. And, I recognize kind of a sobering, no pun intended there, but, it's kind of a sobering situation. But I think that, this is an opportunity where, Christians out there, we can really stand up and be that lighthouse, point people to the eternal hope that we do have, man. So y'all know what it is, man. Hit that like button, subscribe, share this with a friend, enemy, whoever in between. And, definitely hit us up on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We're posting content, for Tru-ID. And if you feel so inclined to support, man, definitely hit us up at patreon.com/Adam Coleman. Tru-ID is a 501c3 organization. So, definitely hit us up with that if you feel so inclined. But y'all know what it is, man. We will definitely be back with you here one more again, man, coming up here pretty soon. Got some content coming down the pike. So with that being the case, y'all know what it is. Love God, love people. Take care of the things that God blesses you with. Peace.